Without test screenings, iconic heroes and villains would have died for good. A talking plant would have taken over the world, and Reese Witherspoon would have been electrocuted. Good thing they happened, huh?
I'm Ron Burgundy?
But you might not recognize yourself there, Ron. The original cut ended with Veronica Corningstone being kidnapped Patty Hearst style, and her colleagues having to save her. But audiences balked at this conclusion and several other plot points, resulting in DreamWorks giving the film's producers a generous stipend to refilm the offending scenes. Ultimately, the movie ends instead with Ron saving Veronica from an angry Kodiak bear, in a flash forward that explains where the Channel 4 news team ends up. All iconic moments that wouldn't have existed if the film's first audiences hadn't given it a 50 out of 100. The original ending of Thor: The Dark World sees the titular Asgardian hero ascend to the throne of his kingdom while his brother Loki perishes and Jane Foster breaks up with him so that they can pursue their individual life goals. Thor's climb to the throne is assisted by Odin's realization that his son isn't blinded by his attraction to Jane, and that his love for her is another positive quality that proves he's ready to be a leader. But test audiences didn't buy Loki's death, necessitating reshoots in which Loki shapeshifted into Odin and revealed himself. Additional scenes were also added, inverting the original's much darker tone. The end result is a movie that fans had mixed feelings about, but ultimately helped move the MCU forward in an interesting way. The original ending of 28 Days Later saw Jim dying of his wounds in the abandoned hospital while Selena and Hannah try desperately to save his life, ultimately failing to revive him. Selena refuses to give in and accept death, telling Hannah that they must keep moving ever onward despite losing their companion. But test audiences were in the mood for at least a little happiness, as they felt that Jim had suffered more than enough by this point. Screenwriter Alex Garland told Inverse in 2023, "The hospital ending was the ending I'd written. Jim dies and the two girls set off into the world. Who knows what happens to them? It tested really badly. Not just badly, but really badly." Luckily, several different endings had been filmed, and the happier alternate conclusion in which Jim, Selena, and Hannah are about to be rescued was the one that made it into theaters.
Do you think you saw us this time?
The original ending of Pretty in Pink saw ambitious high school senior Andy Walsh getting together with her best friend Ducky during the prom. But that reportedly had test audiences rising to their feet in anger, which sent director Howard Deutsch into a tailspin. A quick 5-page revision from screenwriter John Hughes and a one-day reshoot ensured that Andy ended up with rich kid Blaine instead, while Ducky connected with a new girl who smiles at him at the dance. Both audiences and the actors themselves have fiercely debated this last-minute choice in the years since. Although, without the audience intervention, we wouldn't have had one of the most iconic kisses in 80s movie history.
And Ducky, that never would have worked. Come on. It looked ridiculous together.
Army of Darkness is the rare film that managed to have its cake and eat it too, in terms of being released in 2 different cuts. In the original ending, Ash Williams takes too many drops of the juice that the wise man boils up, resulting in him sleeping for much longer than intended, and waking up alone in a post-apocalyptic London and promptly going mad. Unfortunately, test audiences hated this downer ending. So director Sam Raimi quickly filmed a more triumphant conclusion in which Ash wakes up at the proper time and goes back to his job at S-Mart, only to realize he didn't say the words properly and a deadite has followed him home. Then he kills the demon, kisses the girl, and drops some iconic line deliveries.
Sure, I could have stayed in the past. Could have even been king.
Interestingly enough, British audiences saw the original ending, along with several extra moments including a love scene between Ash and Sheila. But without focus groups, certain unforgettable catchphrases would have never existed.
Hail to the king, baby.
The original Little Shop of Horrors ending is a classic case of something working far better on the stage than it does on the screen. In the stage version, Audrey, Seymour, and all of New York City fall to the might of Audrey II and her children. The audience is then left with the warning, "Don't feed the plants." The film version initially ended with a 23-minute spectacular tour de force filled with stop-motion effects in which Audrey II and her buds take over the world. Unfortunately, test audiences responded with horror and shock rather than mirth and laughter. Audience approval scores peaked at 13%, leading to a quick reshoot in which Seymour electrocutes Audrey II and escapes the suburban bliss with Audrey, while a little Audrey II bud grows in the garden. Test audiences hated the original ending to National Lampoon's Vacation. in which Clark Griswold took Wally World owner Roy Wally hostage with his BB gun. Instead of holding a security guard at gunpoint and experiencing a day of magic in the completely empty park, Clark made Roy and his executive friends dance at gunpoint for his amusement. Director Harold Ramis realized that the audience was miffed that after such a long build-up, they were denied a visit to Wally World just as much as the Griswolds were. And so he rectified things with a now legendary conclusion.
Wouldn't you do the same thing for your children?
No.
Sweet Home Alabama pits Southern girl Melanie between her hometown ex-husband Jake and her upper-crust fiancé Andrew. In the end, she picks Jake. But the original ending was so off-putting that it needed to be reshot to match the movie's light tone. In the initial conclusion, Melanie goes to the beach to find Jake as lightning arcs across the sky. Then it cuts to Jake carrying an unconscious Melanie into the reception and announcing that she was killed by a lightning strike, only to reveal she's playing a prank when she rises from the dead. But test audiences found this joke to be in bad taste, leading to a much more conventional, crowd-pleasing ending. Most rom-com characters aren't so hated that audiences want them to end up lonely and miserable. But that's what happened to Julianne from My Best Friend's Wedding. In the original ending, she meets a new guy played by John Corbett at Michael and Kimmy's wedding reception, a development that didn't exactly sit well with the audience. Director P.J. Hogan told Entertainment Weekly in 2017 they wanted her dead. They just couldn't understand her motives. But this time, the studio didn't just give in to what viewers demanded. Since Roberts was the main attraction and the notion of her ending up alone was unacceptable, Julianne's friendship with Rupert Everett's George was expanded, thus providing a happy out for people who hated her and those who hoped she would become a much better friend. Legally Blonde ends pretty much perfectly, with Elle Woods delivering a graduation speech while on-screen text tells us about the main character's futures. But it originally concluded very differently, with Emmett kissing Elle on the courthouse steps after the trial and a flash forward to Elle handing out flyers for her Legally Blonde Defense Fund alongside a newly blonde Vivian. But test audiences didn't think this was a strong enough conclusion for Elle, as it centered too much on the film's romance. So a new ending was promptly conceived in the screening's theater lobby and a big screen classic was born. Test audiences had mixed feelings about the original ending of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, in which the title character ends up with Knives Chow instead of Ramona Flowers. Director Edgar Wright had hoped for a bittersweet, open-ended feeling in the vein of The Graduate. But test audiences were firmly divided into Ramona and Knives camps, with all of them generally dissatisfied about how the two women were treated. So Wright rewrote the ending, making it an open-ended celebration of the uncertainty of love. Knives pushes Scott and Ramona to get back together, and the pair meet in a parking lot, with the future opening up before them as they vow to try again.
Thought maybe we could try again.
1987's Fatal Attraction put the fear of God in adulterers everywhere. After Alex boils Dan's son's bunny and then kidnaps him, he drowns her in the family's bathtub. His wife Beth then puts Alex down with a few well-placed bullets when she leaps from the tub for one more scare. But the original ending was much more complex. Alex took her own life, but made it look like Dan was responsible. The police cart him away, and only Beth knows the truth via a note from Alex. But test audiences were firmly on Dan's side and wanted Alex to die. Ann Archer and Glenn Close fiercely opposed the new ending, although Michael Douglas supported it.
So you can make up your mind which you like better.
The new conclusion clearly worked. Fatal Attraction went on to become one of the biggest box office hits of the year and scored 6 Academy Award nominations. Blade Runner's entire story differs depending on which cut of the film you're watching, and a lot of that had to do with test audience reactions. Switches included streamlining the narrative via Harrison Ford's somewhat controversial and confusing voiceover narration, and making several narrative cuts for clarity's sake. Viewers also influenced the theatrical version's happy ending. In the original cut, Rick Deckard and the replicant Rachel enter an elevator as they head into an uncertain future where Rachel's lifespan may be incredibly limited. The theatrical cut replaces this with Ford's narration, in which Rick declares a more hopeful and open future for the couple.
I didn't know how long we'd have together. Who does?
In subsequent versions, though, the narration and the hopeful ending have been removed. Without test audiences, moviegoers would have said goodbye to John Rambo at the end of his very first movie. The original ending of First Blood sees Rambo dying by asking Colonel Trotman to shoot him. Director Ted Kotcheff believed that this reflected the actual agony suffered by the real-life Vietnam veterans that he interviewed for the film.
You trained me. You made me. You killed me.
But star Sylvester Stallone and audiences saw things differently, with the actor believing that his character had already suffered enough trauma. Plus, test screening viewers reacted with dead silence. So Kotcheff came up with the new conclusion on the fly, and they filmed it on the spot. The original ending for the 2005 version of Pride and Prejudice sees Darcy and Elizabeth having an intimate conversation alone at Pemberley after their wedding. It ends with him asking her how she should be addressed on a daily basis, and with them kissing under the stars as he calls her Mrs. Darcy.
Mrs. Darcy. Mrs. Darcy.
That ending wasn't part of the original Jane Austen novel, which shocked British audiences, who considered it blasphemous and against the spiritual intent of the work. But in stark contrast, American test audiences swooned over this payoff, so it remained in for North American markets while it was cut for the UK. Instead, that version ends when Elizabeth and her father discuss her happiness, which does occur in the book. Star Trek fans are known for their passionate opinions, so perhaps it's not too shocking that their intervention actually saved a character. 1982's Wrath of Khan originally ended with Spock passing away, and then his casket being sent out the ship's hatch and bursting into a blinding flash of light. This presumably would have prevented his resurrection in any future movies, which Leonard Nimoy supported at the time, since he was ready to move on to a directing career. But test audiences weren't so keen on the notion of Spock dying for good. In fact, word about the ending leaked out before the film was released, and the reaction was volatile. Nimoy even received death threats, while fans took out ads in trade magazines to stop the character from dying. Nimoy had to be talked into it, but Spock did indeed survive for future adventures.